Yo! Hegassen here, and today we are reviewing Ant-Man. Remember all those ant-sized promo material they made for this film? Tiny trailers, tiny posters, so much fun. But how fun was Ant-Man the movie? Well, let's get into it.
Ants! Ants! Ant-Man!
Yep, this is a film about ants.
Ants!
And a man that can shrink to the size of an ant.
Ants!
The Ant-Man.
Ant-Man!
Now, with this comes some very, very wrong science. So, when you watch this film, you need to take like your logical, scientific mind and you need to scrumple it up into a ball, and then you need to shrink that ball down to the size that you can barely see, and then you need to throw that ball into the sun, and then you need to shrink down that sun and throw that sun into a black hole.
Wow!
Because, like I say, the science in this film, it doesn't make sense. It's fun to see it on the big screen. It's very much a Honey, I Shrunk My Kids kind of thing, only with superhero action. It's very cool seeing the world in that perspective. But yes, it doesn't make any sense. The way that the creator of this, Hank Pym, explains it in the film is that he has these Pym particles, and the way his Pym particles work is that it changes the distance between atoms. So, for example, oh shit, I should have got these first. You take a man, a full-grown man, and then when you apply the Pym particles, all of the atoms that make up his body, they shrink down so that you can go from a full-size man to a much smaller man. Yeah, I know it's pre-time skip and post-time skip, but just imagine it's Ant-Man. So you take the full-grown man, you can shrink down to something the size of an ant, or actually smaller, as we see later on in this film. Now, of course, that doesn't really make any sense, because what also doesn't change is not only does the amount of atoms that make you up not change, but also like your strength and your weight and your physicality. You're still a full-grown man, but you're the size of an ant.
Ant-Man!
And this is where the film really starts to kind of take liberties with its own laws, because, okay, you shrink down to the size of an ant, and when you punch someone, you still have the full weight of a full-grown man's punch. And this is where the film actually kind of starts taking liberties with its own law, because, you can shrink down to the size of an ant, you still have the strength of a full-grown man, so when you punch someone, it's like you're being punched by a full-grown man, but in a very small area, so it's like a bullet hitting you. So, yeah, okay, that makes sense in the laws of it, but then you have a full-grown man, the size of an ant, so he still weighs and is still the same as a full-grown man, but he can get on the back of an ant and fly around, so without breaking the ant. So that doesn't make any sense, and there's loads of instances in this film where stuff kind of doesn't make sense. He can climb up a person's clothes without them noticing the weight of a full-grown man on him. He can fall onto a record player in the film, and the record player's spinning round, and it's on that little point because it's a record, and he's got a full-grown man on it, and it doesn't break, it doesn't anything, it's still spinning. Yet he falls out of a window and lands on a car, and he dents the car to the weight that a full-grown man would. So there's so many things in this film that don't make sense. The biggest one, the one that I always notice, is the fact that Hank Pym carries a little tank keyring around in his pocket, and that tank is actually an actual proper full-grown tank, yet he can carry it around in his pocket. So wouldn't that tank weigh like hundreds of tons? I don't know how much a tank weighs, but you definitely couldn't carry it around in your pocket. But then later on in the film, we get a very light, very small Thomas the Tank Engine toy. You see that when it lands on a window ledge, it doesn't do anything because it's just a small plastic toy. Yet when it gets blown up to massive sizes, it's heavy enough to like break into the soil and dent a police car. So they really don't stick to their own laws in this film. So like I say, you just got to take science and you just got to throw it to the side and just enjoy the film for the fun ride that it is. So the film starts off and we see Hank Pym in the past, and they did some CGI de-aging. That looks really good. And you find out that, people are trying to take his technology, so he's taking it back. He's going into hiding. He's quitting S.H.I.E.L.D. because he was part of S.H.I.E.L.D. And he states that this technology is dangerous. If you get in the wrong hands, you can do a lot of damage with this technology. So he's gone and he's taken it back. But there are parties that definitely want this, and this becomes the problem in the modern age that Hank Pym is now facing, where there's a company, his old company, is trying to replicate his technology, and he's trying to stop it. We first meet Scott Lang when he's in prison, and in that first scene you're like, okay, who is this guy? Is he a bad guy? You know, he's in prison. It looks like he's in a lot of trouble, so you're like, uh-oh, what's happening to him? And then it's all just this fun and games, like a ending ceremony. He's going out of prison, and here you kind of get a good indication on his character. You know, he's very light-hearted. You know, he's good with people. You know, he gets along with everyone. Yeah, he's a criminal, but you know, you find out later on that he was a noble criminal, or a noble criminal, if that can be a thing, because he exposed some dirty goings on in this big tech company. But we don't really see too much of his past. You know, he seems to know a lot about burglary and stuff. We only ever hear about this one thing. We don't know if he did other things in the past that were maybe a little bit more illegal, or everything's illegal, but a little bit less noble. But no, he's a good character, nice, light-hearted character, very funny character, and you know, he's got a lot of heart. He wants to get out of jail. He wants to see his daughter. He wants to do right for his daughter. When he leaves jail, we see the highlight character of this film, Luis. He's so much fun. He's like the Drax of this film. Every time he's in the film and he says something, I'm laughing. His first opening scene where he's talking about what's happened to him since he got out of jail, I laugh every single time at him telling that story. And he has two little crewmates with him, Kurt and Dave. Both of them are good. All that little group is great. Sadly, don't get to see them too much in this film. Of course, we get to see them a lot more in Ant-Man and the Wasp. But their scenes in this film, they're still really good. And of course, we get the Luis storytelling scene. Yo, man, Luis storytelling is super fresh, yo. Some of the best scenes in the film. Yeah, man, they're super cool. I hear that they do it twice in this film. Once halfway through and once near the end. But I want to see more. Yo, what if they did an entire film of just Luis storytelling? Wouldn't that be great? Yo, I think that'd be really good. Dog, let's redo it as Iron Man. Let's do it unabridged. Now, as stated, Scott wants to go straight. He wants to do right for his daughter. But Luis, he has a job that he's heard about that he wants Scott to do. We find out that this job is going into this mansion to go to this safe. The safe is owned by Hank Pym. And we then find out that Hank Pym has actually been watching Scott, and that he set up this kind of deal so that Scott will break in and he can kind of test what his skills are. Because Hank has big problems of his own. His old apprentice, his old work colleague is taking over his company, and he's developing the Ant-Man technology to make this new suit, the Yellow Jacket, which he wants to sell to all of these arms dealers, and he plays it on these screens as the world is covered in CCTV. Why not shrink down to the size of an ant and slip in undetected? And that's how he promotes his Yellow Jacket suit. Even though later on in the film, Scott Lang goes into the Avengers headquarters and we see him fighting Falcon, and Falcon can see him and detect everywhere where he is.
It's okay. You can't see me.
I can see you.
He can see me.
NANI?
So obviously there's already technology out there where the CCTV can detect ant-sized things. So I don't know where Darren Cross is getting his intel for, but that definitely won't work, you know. Yeah, sure, you can get the Black Jackets go into the Avengers thing, but they know you're coming. Scott just got a little bit lucky. I think they're fighting Falcon in the fact that he actually managed to get in and get out. Maybe if 4 showed up, it would have been a completely different story. But yes, Hank is very worried about the fact that Cross is going to sell this suit to these weapons dealers, who we later find out are actually all members of Hydra. Mainly because the fact that Cross is crazy. And not just crazy because of the particles, crazy just because he is crazy. I mean, straight away at the beginning of the film, we see him kill this guy using this gun that uses the Pym particles. It doesn't quite work. It just turns him into like this little blob, this little splat that he just picks up with a tissue and flushes down the toilet. Forget the Yellow Jacket suit. Sell that. A gun that turns people into little blobs that you can just flick away and hide really easily. Pretty sure a lot of people will buy that technology, so sell that instead of the Yellow Jacket suit, which is already completely redundant in this film since you can already detect it coming.
I can see you.
He can see me.
But yes, Cross is bad news. He's another MCU evil businessman, but at least in this one he's played up as an evil, crazy businessman from the start. He's quite a fun character. He has some very fun lines. You see from the beginning of the film that, yeah, he is a total slime when Hank is going to do this like little tech demo that he gets invited to. He's like, let me introduce you to the founder, Hank Pym. And then he steps to the side and you got a model of Hank Pym's building, but it's got Cross on it. He doesn't say anything about it, but he's just got this smug look on his face like, yeah, I own your company now. And you're just like, this guy's a slime. So later on when Hank gives him a good sucker punch, you're like, yes, you deserve that. It's also in these early scenes that we meet Hope, Hank Pym's daughter, and she's really good. At first you think that Hank and her are at odds, they're not working together, they seem to have this very professional relationship, not father and daughter relationship, but then you find out that no, she's actually working for Hank, but yes, they don't get along, they haven't got that father-daughter relationship. You can tell that Hope doesn't really want to work with Hank. What you later find out, the fact that why Hank is so cold or like pushing Hope away is that he just wants to protect her. Her mum died using the Ant-Man suit. She wants to use the Ant-Man suit. Hank's like, no, you can't use it, and he's doing that to protect her because he doesn't want her to share that same fate, but at the time she doesn't know it. Of course we get Ant-Man and the Wasp later on, so we do get to see her actually be the Wasp later on and use the suit, but for this film he's very much like, look, I don't want you to use the suit, you know, you're too precious for me. That's why he goes to Scott. So Scott takes the bait eventually and he goes to burgle Hank's house. He thinks that Hank is out of the house and that he's got a safe with a lot of money in it, a lot of really precious stuff in there. So he goes into the house. It's really good to see him burgling into this house. We get to see that he's actually a very smart guy. He knows a lot. He's definitely been a burglar for a long time. He knows everything about safes and how to do it. You know, he's probably got some scientific knowledge in there as well, because he knows how to like use the ice to expand and break the metal and stuff. So you see he's a very smart guy. Not like kind of Tony Stark level smart, Hank Pym level smart, Bruce Banner level smart, but you know, more of a kind of just a general kind of street savvy smart, and he knows his own specialist things. It's a shame that sometimes they do play him down as a little bit more of a comedian, comic effects. He seems to fluctuate from like being portrayed as like dumb to smart to dumb to smart. So I just do wish we get to see smart Scott a little bit more, but he breaks into the house. That's a really good scene. One thing I did notice watching it this time is Hank's meant to be out of the house, yet all of the lamps and stuff are on in the house. You're wasting electricity, Hank, come on. So he busts into the safe, and all there is the Ant-Man suit. He doesn't know it as the Ant-Man suit. He thinks it's just like some biker gear, so he takes it. And then he goes back to the house, and he's like, I can't believe I've only got this biker gear. And for some reason, he puts it on. Hank was taking a big gamble there, thinking that Scott would nick the suit and wear the suit. But the second he wears the suit, you find out that it's all been a setup from Hank and that Hank's been watching the entire time. And this is where we get our first look at the Ant-Man technology. He's in this bathtub and Louis is trying to get into the bath, and God knows what Scott is seeing, but I can imagine it's not very nice. And then we see him fall through the floors of the house. That's really fun. This is where we get that scene where he falls onto the bathroom floor and he cracks a tile, and then he falls onto a record player and the record player doesn't even get a scratch on it. I feel really sorry for the neighbours, by the way, that there's this constant 24/7 rave house going on, and then he falls through the next floor and he's getting sucked up by a hoover and stuff, and this is where he smashes out the window and lands on the car and dents it. So this is where we really start to see the suit in action and what it can do, and it all looks really amazing, it all looks really good, but we also start to see where it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Scott tries to return the suit and in the process gets arrested, and this is where Hank gives him the, look, you can either go jail or you can help me. Scott thankfully decides he's going to help Hank, and this is where we get our first introduction to the ants.
Ants!
And using the ants and flying around. That's another really cool scene. I'm always like, how is that ant picking him up? But you just got to take it, scrumple it up, throw it away. And from here we really get into the Ant-Man side of this film, where he's now training to become a brand new Ant-Man.
Ant-Man.
This is all really fun stuff. It's a great little montage. I do like a good montage when done right, and this one was done right. Gives us all of the basic information that we need to know. We find out about the fact that there's a regulator, and if you play with a regulator, you go too small. That's another thing I'll get on into a little bit later on. And we get introductions to all of the ants and stuff that they have. One really weird thing I noticed is that in this scene, Hope, she's trying to prove that she should be in the suit, so she's demonstrating her ant powers, or her powers that she can use to control ants. And every time she does it, the ants just appear, like she wants them to go on the lamp. And we don't have to wait like 10 minutes for the ants to go from the garden up to the lamp, then crawl down the lamp. No, they're already up on the lamp.
Ants.
There's a scene where Scott's practicing in the car, and we don't have to wait 5 minutes for them to come from the street up the door into the car. They just kind of come out of like a little vent.
Ants.
So in their house and car, they're just ants everywhere, and we can't see them, just like lurking behind a teapot or sitting on the sofa, and they're just underneath the sofa. It's a little bit strange. Don't know how hygienic that will be. So Scott trains up. Like I say, we get that scene where he fights Falcon at the Avengers. It's a good little scene. It does kind of feel like it's thrown in just to connect it to the wider universe. But no, it's good to see Falcon again. He takes an L here, but it's a fun little scene. But this leads into the main focus of the film, the heist scene. This film is very much a heist film, very unique for the MCU, and it's a great little scene seeing them get into cross labs. And this is where we really get to see the Ant-Man suit in action. Like, we get to see him fighting people, jumping on their guns and stuff. The stuff that we saw in the tech reel way before this film came out. So that's really good to see. A lot of good action in this scene. And this is where we build up to the final fight with Cross. Yes, it's another Ant-Man versus a man in another Ant-Man suit with the same powers. But I think for this first film, what else are you really going to do? You want to explore that Ant-Man technology and that small scale, shrinking down, fighting small, then going big, doing a punch and stuff. And that wouldn't work if you had like Ant-Man fighting some completely different person with completely different powers. So it does work for this film. Their little fights are good. Unlike in past films, we actually get a nice, good, long, sustained fight that goes on for a little bit. And I do really love this fight. I love how it keeps changing from them fighting really close up the size of ants, and then zooming out to how everybody else in the world would see it. It just looks so like undramatic and like unintentionally really funny. The Yellow Jacket suit looks pretty good. I like how when it fires its lasers, it sounds like AT-ATs from Star Wars or ATSTs. It's definitely got that Star Wars sound effect. That's really cool. And you have probably one of the best final fights in the MCU, the fight on the Thomas the Tank Engine train track. That's so much fun. Yeah, it's a bit weird that when it zooms in, it has an actual steam train sound effects playing, and when he throws all of the carriages, like Annie and Clarabelle and stuff, and Cross shoots them, they explode in a big explosion. But it's all great fun. In this scene, we get to see things getting big and small. This is where we get that scene where the Thomas goes massive and crashes a car. That doesn't make sense. We also see an ant go from a tiny ant to like the size of a dog. That's really funny. It doesn't also make sense because that ant would suffocate and die in Earth's current oxygen levels. But again, for this film, it's like, fine, whatever. We've already thrown science out the window, so why not? Let's have an ant the size of a dog. And then we get the final moment where Scott's like, look, I need to protect my daughter. So he takes off his regulator and he goes quantum into the back of Cross's suit to take it down, frying all the circuitry. I always think it's weird how the daughter just watches this guy collapse into like a singularity. It must be quite graphic for her. Her cop stepdad that doesn't even like cover her eyes or anything like that. She's just watching it all. I mean, she likes that ghoulish toy that Scott bought her earlier on, so maybe she's fine with it. By the way, I haven't mentioned the fact that Scott and his daughter's relationship in this film is so much fun. She's probably one of the funniest characters in the film. But yeah, Scott goes in, he goes down into the quantum world, and this scene is epic. This is like one of the first of the MCU big, weird, trippy scenes that seem to become a bit of a standard after this film. But it's amazing. I I remember seeing it in IMAX, and all of the sound and all of the visuals were just amazing. It was like, whoa, this is crazy. Definitely see a silhouette in this scene, which is, you know, build up for the next film to come. But yeah, this scene is great. This is another one where it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really abide by its own laws. So as Hank said, the Pym particles just remove the space between atoms. So the atoms themselves aren't actually changing sizes, you're just removing the space. In fact, you know, in real life, if you actually took, you know, a human and you did remove all of the space between atoms, you could shrink them down to like the size of like a sugar cube, because it's only that negative space in between. We don't notice it because there's all forces and stuff stopping us from actually noticing the fact that there is a lot of empty space here in my hand. You know, friction and stuff like that is stopping me from basically putting my hand straight through it. I don't know the exact bits of the science, but that's it at a basic level. So what doesn't make sense here is that if he's not changing the size of the atoms, how can he go like subatomic and quantum once you take the regular out? Obviously he is changing the size of an atoms, because if you were only changing the size of the space, you'd get down to a point where you surely can't go any smaller, right? But here he's going quantum subatomic. Again, you just got to throw that science out of the window because that doesn't make any sense. I think in the comic books they explained all of this stuff a little bit differently. You know, I think in the comic books a lot of the maths went into like pocket dimensions and stuff, so it was a little bit different. So maybe it makes more sense in the comics as it does in the film. Maybe Hank is just giving a really, really simplified explanation of it for Scott. Maybe there is a lot more going on that we don't actually realise that the Pym particles are doing. But regardless, this is a really cool, funky scene. So overall, what do I think of Ant-Man? Ignoring that science stuff that I've kept banging on about, I think Ant-Man is a really good fun ride. The characters are really fun, their interactions are really fun. I like the Scott-Hank dynamic, I like the Hank-Hope dynamic, I like the Hope-Scott dynamic, and I like all of the little side characters. I don't think there are any characters that I really kind of dislike. Shawcross is a bit of a slime ball and he's just another angry businessman and just another man in an Ant-Man suit. But his scenes are pretty fun, you know, he's a pretty good fun character. The action's really good. Seeing all of the ant shrinking stuff, that's really fun. All of the heist stuff is really nice and fresh. So Ant-Man for me is just a really nice, fun ride, really enjoyable film. Ant-Man for me, it is gold tier film. It's just a film that I really like watching. I enjoy it every single time. It's funny, it's good action, it's got a lot of heart. And out of all of the MCU films, it probably has my favourite soundtrack. For some reason I always get the Ant-Man soundtrack stuck in my head. The dum dum da dum 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 da dum 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 da dum 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 da dum. Why it's always stuck in my head, I don't know. But it is. So yes, Ant-Man, good film.
Ant-Man!
And with Ant-Man, that completes Marvel's Phase 2. Finally! Here are my ranks of all of the Phase 2 films. Overall, pretty good phase. It started off a little bit slow, a little bit rubbish to be honest with you. But it really picked up at the end. Once we got to about Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, really started getting into the MCU here. Hey, so thanks for watching. What did you think? Let me know about it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed my video, maybe give it a like, and if you really liked it, why not subscribe? You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram and Twitch. Oh, and here's a related video you might enjoy, and something more fresh. I've been Hegassen, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!